Day.
And I'm Richard Day.
We're both chiropractors.
We've been in practice together for 11 years.
Married for 10.
With 3 beautiful little girls.
We know it's possible to have an exceptional practice that's built around your life.
Because we've done it.
So we've created this podcast,
the Lifestyle Practice Builders Podcast.
We'll interview chiropractors, answer questions, and bring you resources to help build and grow your practice.
So let's get this party started.
Welcome back to Lifestyle Practice Builders Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Haley Day, and this week we turn the tables and let Josh Glassman, a chiropractic student at Logan University, ask me some questions. Josh is in his last year of school and had several questions about transitioning from student to practicing chiropractor, so I asked if he'd let me record our conversation and share it with you all. We actually recorded the podcast in March before all the craziness, but everything we talk about is still very relevant. I have to give Josh a huge shout out. We actually had to record this twice because my auto record didn't come on in Zoom and I didn't notice it until we were almost done recording. So he, after spending an entire day in clinic, caring for 3 kids, putting them to bed and all, he came back on and recorded at 9 p.m. that same night. I want to thank him. He asked great questions and you all will gain some great insights from everything we talk about: working with a spouse, starting a practice with a family, aspects of buying a practice, of startup, and communication when working with a spouse. We touch on several topics relevant to students, soon-to-be graduates, and those in their first years of practice. So let's listen to part 1 of Josh and I's conversation. I'll post part 2 later this week.
So thank you, Josh, for being on the podcast. I want to thank you, especially because we're recording this again because I had a mishap earlier. So soon to be Dr. Josh Glassman on the podcast today.
Yes, I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you.
So I want to start just with a quick little background of you so that everyone has an idea of your situation, and then we're going to kind of dive deep into some questions. You're a student at Logan, and you have approximately a year left, but 8 months of that you'll be doing a preceptorship in Oregon.
Yes, that's correct.
And you are married with 3 delightful kids.
Yes, they are a riot, and we love them so much.
Good. So I'm going to answer some of your questions. Is there anything else that we kind of touched on before we got started?
No, not that I can recall. I think that was mainly the gist of it.
Okay, cool. We did talk about your wife was from Arkansas.
Yes.
And you guys are currently in St. Louis, but you plan to go back to Oregon. At least for the preceptorship.
At least for the preceptorship, but we kind of figure we'll end up setting up shop there somewhere.
Okay. So shoot off your first question.
Yeah. So going off of, talking about with my wife, so she is a stay-at-home mom. She is a hero, both in my eyes and also in the eyes of our kids. Just an absolute champ of a woman. Hopefully she can hear me, but I don't think she can. But I mean it all. She really is. And so one of the things that she and I have talked about is looking into, I guess, first, either do we start our own practice? Do we, if luck runs the right way, buy a practice, or start off at least with some sort of a salary going by doing an associate for a few years? I guess what would be kind of the best way of making sure there's some sort of a stable-ish environment for a family kind of right out of the gates? What would be your recommendation, both, I guess, right out of the gates, but also looking at, long run, what's going to be more worth it?
Sure. I think at first, if you are, if you don't have much of a savings and you aren't, and then also if you aren't sure of where you're going to go, or even if you are sure but you don't have much savings, definitely associating is a good choice. But you should be looking long term. If you are going to associate, how can you get out of that, and what kind of plans, what goals do you need to set to get to that place? But, initially you want to settle into the associate position and do a good job and learn everything you can, and then start setting aside the savings to eventually open your own. But I think if you have your own, you have some savings, you have some help to get started, then definitely starting on your own is nice, or even buying a practice. And you'll find a practice where the owner will fund the loan. So you'll sign, contracts to buy the practice, and then you'll pay them monthly on the loan of the practice rather than a bank. Okay. Other times, if the practice is very solid and you are solid on paper, then the bank will loan you the money because they know that there's something that's already working there. Uh-huh. And then also there's the opportunity to get started as an independent contractor. And so you're starting your own practice, maybe within someone else's practice, or it could even be a different business. It could be in a hospital, or it could be in a massage therapist office or an acupuncturist office. So in our practice, we have 2 right now, but we've had others in the past that's where they've started. They've started in our practice, and they have their own logo, their own website, do everything on their own. They just pay rent to be in our office, and they can use our therapies, that kind of thing. So it keeps the cost low.
I guess as a follow-up for that, if the opportunity of buying a practice were to arise, how far out would you recommend looking into that? How soon to, I guess making sure graduation and boards and all of that, licensing, how far out would be too far out, or how far out would be perfect to kind of start looking into options like that?
I think that you should probably have a very good idea of what you're going to do 3 months out from graduation. Okay. But if you're going to look at practices, I think you should start before then. There may be an opportunity like to preceptor at someone's practice that they want to sell, or but it takes a long time. When we moved to Kansas City, we bought a practice and we looked at practices for 2 years, I want to say. And so there were, there's only so many available, and then making sure that you find one that's congruent with how you practice, or as congruent as possible, and that their books look good and you like the office. I went in one office and there were no windows in the whole office. And I thought I couldn't do that. And there's an office within our office with no windows, but to be, just in this kind of cave all day I don't think I could have done it. So
I wouldn't do that either.
All of these things need to kind of fall in line. And so it can't hurt to start, as soon as possible. When we knew we were going to move to Colorado, we started looking at places at least a year before graduation, just to get a lay of the land and visit the area, and so that we knew more about it than just visiting once or looking online, that kind of thing. So, and there are a lot of kids at Cleveland that want to go have the dreams of living in Colorado. And I've known several people that have gone and done preceptors or worked a year as an associate out there and then decided to move away just because it didn't end up being the dream they thought it was going to be. So
yeah, I understand that.
So it's maybe harder with kids than it would be for, someone who has easier to move around. Yeah. But I think visiting and researching and figuring out as much as you can is best.
Okay. And I know earlier when we talked, I guess you can say I maybe went down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I remember asking about with buying a practice, if that is an option. And the only reason I ask is because there is one that is somewhat available that I'm trying to look into. Obviously, I don't know if it'll work out because I do still have a year left of school, but looking into kind of like you said, how congruent it is with, kind of your own ideology, your own way of practicing, how much is, I guess, too much to change if it's not quite there versus accepting the fact that because you are going to be a different doctor and finding your own patients, I guess what's kind of the turnaround that would be acceptable when buying a practice?
Sure. I think people do it all the time when they hire new associates. They're hiring someone else to come in their practice and be them or fill that position. And so I think there's a little wiggle room unless it's a specific technique like a BEST or an SA or, I don't know, all of them, or activator. If you do no activator, you don't want to buy an activator practice. I think that would be harder. But I think if there's enough that you can see yourself kind of emulating that past doctor for those patients, and then maybe being yourself for the newer ones, and that's possible, then I think that would work. But I think I said earlier that when I worked for a doctor and she made a change, she went from putting one therapy table to putting 2 therapy tables in each room and took the door off. And it made some of the old patients that had been there for a long time uncomfortable. But after a couple weeks, either people didn't notice anymore or they didn't care. And then I'm sure a few patients left, but not very many. And then everyone else coming in was new. They knew nothing different. So they didn't, there was nothing to be upset about. So I think primarily when you buy a practice, you're going to have mostly new patients coming in. And as long as you can do what you can for the patients that were coming before, then that's great. And if you don't think that you can emulate that person very well, then maybe that wouldn't work out.
So with that, one more question that kind of comes to my mind. I had mentioned this to my wife earlier, and she'd raised a really good question to me. So I thought I'd ask it. Is with kind of like you said, emulating, the previous doc, how much of that, I guess, is a good thing versus a bad thing, because you're wanting to, be yourself, bring your tools, your strengths to it, and not trying to be someone that you're not, versus still trying to, provide a level, not necessarily, I guess, a level of treatment, but a specific style of treatment that these patients may have become accustomed to. Does that make sense?
Without knowing exactly what the difference is, I think you can ease into who you are, So let's say that you guys are 80% similar, and these patients, this other 20% you can do, but it's not something you go straight to in your toolbox. Well, I would say, like, for their first visit, you try to be like the old doctor, try to figure out what they're doing. Then on the next visit, maybe, introduce something different, or, so you're kind of easing into it rather than an abrupt change from, well, this is me now, but you can try to get a good feel for them, what they're looking for, what they liked. Maybe there's things they didn't like. So I think, I had a patient tonight, a new patient, and she had never been in our practice, but I asked her what she's used to. So, anywhere even a new patient at your own practice is going to have been to another chiropractor, and they're going to have things that they liked, things they didn't like, and their perception of what they need. So I think you're going to understand that, try to understand that with any patient you're going to have. And it's the same in the practice if you buy it.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So I guess then my next question, again, kind of going back to my roots with my wife and my family, what would you say is kind of the best way to involve your spouse and your family in practice, but also in life, maintaining a really good both kind of business and family relationship?
Sure. So this is exactly where we were at when we graduated. We moved to Colorado to be close to Rich's son. And what was most important to us was our time with him, and that when we were with him, it was quality, but also we had our business to build. And so we put a lot of effort into combining the two. And so we really got engaged in the community, and we brought him with us to events. He was in our office, and we were able to kind of bring the two together by involving him in the process. So I think having your wife either working in your office as the front desk or any other position, and then having your kids and your wife at events, there's plenty of opportunities for that. And I know you, so you have one of your daughters is in school already, right?
Yeah, in kindergarten.
And then you guys are active in your church. So those are two main places where you're going to network a lot, and you'll be with your family, because that's the school with your daughter, and then with your family at church. And then also in your neighborhood, you'll, that's kind of networking, getting to know your neighbors, having barbecues, that kind of thing. So I think there's plenty of option. There's plenty of room to involve them, but also you need to realize that all of your main goal is to grow the practice. And so you're going to have to spend extra time there or be a little malleable with your time too.
Okay. I know that is the one thing that we've also kind of had to adjust with is school obviously taking up so much time that I study better at home, even with, the chaos of kids and everything running around. I study better at home than I do on campus. And so I will still, we live about 25 minutes away from school. And so I'll still go ahead and make that drive home. I come home and either, spend a little bit of time with my kids right before dinner when I get home, and then try to focus on as much studying as I can after I put them down to bed, which isn't always my favorite. When sun goes down, generally my focus is down as well. But I've really tried to be flexible to make sure that I'm not shirking my duty as a father and as a husband, but also making sure that I'm still trying to be the best student that I can. And so I feel like that is something that will have to be applied forward as well with the business, is trying to one of our goals is always that we have dinner as a family. Mm-hmm. And making sure that, I want to keep that as a priority. And so however, I guess, work business may have to be settled around that. I'll do what I have to do, really.
Yeah.
But that's one thing that we've always talked about is we want to make sure that we always have a dinner together at a table as a family. And then I know something else that I think I'd mentioned before was like we set aside our Friday night as like a Friday family fun night. Mm-hmm. Where we try to make that just about us doing stuff together, whether it's, dinner and a movie or activities, hiking, whatever it may be. We make sure that time right there is set for us all to be together and grow as a family. And so then I guess looking forward toward business, there will be changes. There will be things that I'm sure we will have to do. And, I think a good word that you used was malleable, just knowing that whatever the sacrifices are, that our family's livelihood really will also depend on the business's livelihood.
Yeah. And we were able to, my husband, our time with his son wasn't 100%. So we were in a little different boat, but we always worked our hours around his schedule. So over our lunch break, we would go pick him up from school. So we always picked him up from school together. We always went to work after he went to school. So we would take him to school and then go to work. And then during the summer, we would have on-off days with him. So we had a summer schedule. And so we would close the office, this morning or this afternoon so that we could be at the pool with him and do things with him. But I think one of the things we really did was if we were working, we were working. I mean, we were working hard. And if we weren't, then we were enjoying ourselves together. But we're trying to do as much networking and community involvement as possible. And I think that really made the difference.
Okay. So I think that would be a good thing. And I guess then as well, I can see the advantage of, either buying or having your own practice then of being able to set your own hours. Whereas as an associate, you'd be more at the mercy, I guess, of when they want you in, when they need you in.
Yeah, definitely. If you open your own practice, well, you'd have the flexibility too of having your wife work there, bring your kids in there, that kind of thing. And then, certainly working your schedule around when you want to be there. When we first opened, we kept our hours. We were open a lot. And a lot of people will say, create the business you want. Well, when you're starting out and you have all these duties, for us, it was just so easy to have all the time open and figure out what people wanted. And then as we figured out where people wanted to come in, then we started making blocks of time off. And so we ended up having like a 3-hour lunch because we were in a community with no businesses. So we saw primarily stay-at-home moms, people who worked from home, that kind of thing. So we didn't need to be there over lunch. Now where we're at in Kansas City, a lot of our patients come over lunch because they're coming over their lunch break from the office. So, a lot of those things will depend on your schedule too, is you want to be there when people want to come in. And then another thing we did was we were open Saturdays. And
I know a lot of people that have done that.
Yeah, and we thought, well, and we really liked it because it's casual and people come in and it's fun, and you have people come in that couldn't get in anywhere else and they think you're the best ever because they could come see you. So
yeah, before I started going to school here in Logan, I worked at a place or as a CA, and they ended up starting with some Saturday hours because they had several patients who would come in and say, oh, it's so hard to schedule because I'm always doing this or I'm at work. And if you had Saturdays, it would make it so much easier. And so they looked into it and ended up starting doing, I think, like an every other Saturday type thing to allow some of those people to start getting in. From what it seemed like, it worked very well for them.
Yeah. And we just thought, if it doesn't bother our schedule, then why do we care? And, sometimes that would be our best day of the week. But then when we wanted to take a 3-day weekend and go into the mountains or a week off to come home to Kansas City, then we didn't care because we knew we had been doing everything we could up to that point. And we'd been working all these Saturdays. Hey, let's take this one off. Or if no one's scheduled, we didn't go in. So the flexibility is nice there.
Okay.
So many great things we talked about today. So stay tuned. We'll post part 2 later this week. I hope you guys are enjoying this. Thank you again to Josh for coming on and sharing with us. It's a huge step to going from student to practicing chiropractor, and that's what we love to help you guys out here with. So stay tuned and listen to the rest of the episode later this week.
If you enjoyed this podcast episode, please share it with your friends on Instagram and Facebook. And for those of you who are already subscribers, we really appreciate it. Thanks for the reviews. We love reading those and knowing that you're loving the podcast. If you're looking for more tips and inspiration, be sure to check us out at lifestylepracticebuilders.com or join our business and marketing Facebook group for chiropractors at facebook.com/group/lifestylepractice.